Episode 3, Alaska Case. Eagle, Alaska. In August of 1977, 5 young men, Jack Friedman, Siem Hanja, Jerry Horn, John Temple, and Mark Baker, whose backcountry explorations in Alaska, far from civilization, brought them face to face with a bizarre UFO experience. They were making their way south after a month of hiking near Eagle, on the Yukon River, over the old Gold Rush route, and through some fabulous wilderness. They camped on a ridge overlooking a vista of endless spruce forests, snow-capped peaks, and glacial rivers. One of the campers, Jack Friedman, a trained pilot who once taught night navigation in the Coast Guard, woke before dawn and walked to a nearby stream to wash up. He was stopped in his tracks by an unearthly sight, a squadron of circular aircraft, 15 or 20 of them, hovering perfectly over a clearing in the valley below.
I wasn't awake, but that woke me up. They must have been a half-mile away, down in the valley. I'd guess they were 20 or 30 feet in diameter. They were glowing a warm orange glow, translucent, like those glow necklaces they sell at rock concerts. They looked like 2 half-shells separated by a black band, an empty space that circled them in the middle. I stood with my mouth wide open, watching them hover like lit-up hummingbirds over a clearing. I swear I never believed of this UFO stuff. But my own eyes, I believe. And I believe my body too. I was quivering all over. I felt like I had just stuck my finger in a socket. I was stunned, hypnotized, the way a deer gets stunned in a car's headlights and can't move. I had heard a lot of sourdoughs prospector hermits who had told stories about spaceships in the wilderness. But here, I was seeing a whole group of them. By the time I got myself together to go back to the tents to wake my buddies, the craft were gone. Everybody thought I was crazy, hallucinating, and so did I, for a while. But the image was so definite, so eerie. I knew it wasn't a dream, but reality, except it was a reality I wasn't used to seeing. I suggested we pack up our stuff and go check out that clearing down in the valley. It took us a couple of hours to make it down, then it was my buddies' turns to gawk. What we saw in that clearing you will not believe. First, there was a huge circular imprint, a circle where the grass had been flattened, scorched, and swirled out clockwise from the center. There were 4 triangular prints near the circle's rim that went down 2 or 3 inches into the soil. Small trees and saplings had been broken and flattened. A feathery kind of white filament, sort of like spider webs, was on the leaves and grass on the edge of the circle. It was weird stuff. It seemed to disintegrate when you touched it.
This phenomenon is known as angel hair, which often occurs during UFO sightings. They are thin, sticky fibers of a gelatinous substance similar to spider webs, which appear suddenly and disintegrate shortly after. During a sighting in Portugal, it was possible to analyze this phenomenon under a microscope, which according to researchers, seemed to be alive and displayed characteristics of a being that does not exist on planet Earth.
But the real sight was the bodies, hundreds of mutilated animal carcasses, moose with no legs, their antlers removed and piled separately, elk with no internal organs at all, caribou slumped on the ground like popped balloons, missing their skeletons, grizzly bears, the biggest I've seen, with no eyes and no claws, some of the most beautiful animals in the wilds. They were heaped in piles. There were dark burn marks around the circle's edge, and some odd-shaped black rocks lying around. The weird thing was, there was no blood. The wounds were closed and clean, like some kind of new bloodless surgery had been performed. We could only guess how it had been done, maybe some kind of laser. The most astonishing thing we saw, standing among the piles of carcasses, was the body of a small killer whale, about 15 feet long, with the characteristic black and white markings. It had been completely gutted. We really freaked then. We were hundreds of miles from the Gulf of Alaska.
The distance between Eagle and the easternmost point of the Gulf of Alaska, which is located near Yakutat, is approximately 600 kilometers as the crow flies. However, if you were to travel by road, the distance would be much greater as there are no roads connecting Eagle to the coast.
We picked up a few bones and a few of those black rocks with the funny markings on them. When we got back to Anchorage, we reported what we had seen. Every government agency we could think of: the Air Force, the FBI, the state police, several state agencies like Fish and Game, the National Park Service, and of course, all we got were snickers, polite smiles, and some forms to fill out. I wonder where those forms are gathering dust. Probably on some bureaucrat's desk, some guy who's never even been into the backcountry. When we were going through customs at the Canadian border, heading home, funny thing happened. A plainclothes guy asked us to step into an office and tell our UFO story. Step by step, he told us how ridiculous our story was, how unreal it all was, and suggested that we be realistic and not tell the story to anybody in the lower 48. For a guy who thought it was so crazy, he took a strange interest in us. He tape recorded our whole interview, and he told us over and over how stupid it would be to tell anyone what we saw. The guy was very spooky, I'll tell you that.
One of the backpackers, C.M. Hanja, is a Finnish student working for his doctorate in geology at Columbia University. Hanja was fascinated by the strange stones that were scattered around the clearing among the mutilated animal bodies. He took them to a research geologist at the Department of Natural Resources in Anchorage, who was completely baffled by the weird symbolic markings that had apparently been burned into the rocks. When the state experts couldn't give him a satisfactory answer as to the origin of the stones, Hanja intended to take them back to New York, where he knew some National Science Foundation scientists and some Columbia professors who would let him use sophisticated lab equipment to test the rocks, magnetism, mineral content, and radiation. But Hanja never got the chance. The rocks, 12 in all, were stolen from his suitcase en route to New York.
Somebody wanted those rocks real bad. I know I mentioned them to the spooky guy at customs. You figure it out.
Don't forget to click like, subscribe, and to turn on the notifications. I will see you on the next episode of UFO Real.